The envelope was heavy. Embossed lettering, thick cardstock, the kind of thing that doesn't get mailed, it gets hand-delivered. Ethan found it wedged between a utility bill and a coupon booklet in his mailbox, addressed in gold script he recognized instantly. Aunt Karen's handwriting. He didn't open it right away. He carried it inside, tossed it on the kitchen counter next to a half-eaten burrito, and stared at it like it might explode. It didn't. The next morning, he opened it while reheating coffee. You are cordially invited to Blake's 30th birthday celebration. Rooftop venue, valet parking, cocktail attire. Of course. His cousin Blake didn't just have birthdays, she had milestones. Ethan hovered over the trash can, envelope in one hand, phone in the other. Group texts from his sister and two cousins buzzed with, "Are you going?" And, "You better show, Grandma's gonna be there." That was the only reason he didn't delete it. Grandma, 93 years old, still asked if he was the one with the computers. He owed her that much. Still, the thought of showing up made his stomach knot. Blake's parties were Karen's chance to parade her son like a blue-ribbon show dog. Ethan could already hear the conversation: stock portfolios, ski condos, kids with names like Thatcher and Ellington. And then there'd be him, Ethan Clark, mid-30s, single, living in a one-bedroom apartment over a bakery, working 60-hour weeks, building ad funnels and market copy for a startup his family still thought was that thing with the emojis. The last time they'd all been in one room, Karen asked with a straight face if his company made TikToks for cats. That was the problem. Not just that they didn't understand what he did, but that they didn't care to. To them, success had a very specific look: suits, mortgages, and a country club membership. Ethan had none of those. Still, he RSVP'd. Yes, not out of pride, not out of guilt, but because he was tired of avoiding the people who treated him like he'd failed some invisible test. If they were going to label him the failure, fine. He could wear that label and still walk in upright. He just didn't expect what would happen once he did. The first time Aunt Karen called him one of the creative ones, Ethan was 12 and had just won a middle school art contest. She said it like it was contagious. By college, the phrasing changed. Free-spirited. Non-traditional. Figuring it out. But by the time he hit 30 and was still working contract gigs in marketing while living off cold brew and frozen Trader Joe's meals, she dropped the euphemisms. She called it what she believed it was: failure. Blake, her only son, never heard that word. He graduated from Wharton, joined a hedge fund, got an apartment in Tribeca with floor-to-ceiling windows and a Viking stove he never used. At family functions, Blake spoke in acronyms and investment jargon no one understood, and Aunt Karen beamed like she'd bred a thoroughbred. Ethan remembered Thanksgiving 3 years ago. He'd been fresh off a brutal layoff from a digital agency that folded overnight. He brought wine, helped with dishes, even fixed Grandma's email. Karen cornered him by the cranberry sauce. "Maybe it's time to think about something more stable," she said sweetly, before pivoting to tell everyone Blake had just invested in a boutique tequila company. Stability. That was the word she clung to, as if it were a moral virtue. Ethan, meanwhile, was the one chasing unstable dreams, despite the fact he'd been working like hell to rebuild after the layoff. He'd taken a pay cut to join a tech startup that barely had an office, just 7 people, and a Google Drive full of ideas. But 2 years later, they had grown fast, doubled headcount, and just closed a major Series C round. Ethan was the brand strategist behind the campaigns that brought in their biggest client. But none of that mattered at the family table, where job titles ended in vice president or started with senior partner. To them, his hoodie and laptop made him a man-child. To them, he wasn't building anything, just avoiding adulthood. His apartment didn't count because he rented. His salary didn't count because it wasn't corporate. His life didn't count because it didn't look like theirs. And maybe that's why he hadn't told them about the Forbes article or the speaking invitation at a tech summit in Austin, because they wouldn't care. Not until someone else made them care. Ethan sat on his fire escape with a lukewarm beer in one hand and his phone in the other, staring at his sister's latest message. "You have to come. It's Grandma's last big party. You know how much she loves you." He did know. And that was the problem. Grandma wouldn't say anything if he didn't show she'd just sit a little quieter, her hands folded in her lap, glancing at the door now and then like she'd missed a bus that was never coming. Guilt had a way of creeping in sideways. He thumbed through old texts from his sister photos of Grandma holding a pie, wearing a ridiculous birthday hat, or just sitting on the porch smiling in the sunlight. She still sent handwritten letters. Still signed them, "Love you more than oatmeal raisin." She was the only one in that family who had never once tried to rank Ethan on a scorecard. That counted for something. Still, he had every reason not to go. Aunt Karen's parties weren't celebrations, they were showcases. Everyone dressed like they were going to an awards banquet, then stood around pretending their lives were movie trailers. Blake would give some pre-rehearsed speech about hitting 30 while doing real adult things, and Karen would nod along like he'd invented compound interest. Ethan knew the script. He just didn't want to be part of it anymore. But family ties are funny. Even when they cut, they tug. So Ethan replied with a single word: coming. He didn't tell anyone how much it cost to get his suit dry cleaned or that he skipped a Friday night date to make it happen. He didn't say he'd already mapped out an escape plan: arrive at 7, leave by 8:30. No matter what. That was the deal. 1 hour and a half. Smile, shake hands, find Grandma, be kind, then ghost. No scenes, no clapbacks, no drama, just dignity. He hung his suit on the back of his door that night and tried not to think about how many people would measure him before he even walked through the door. He was used to being underestimated. But this time, he wouldn't flinch from it. The Uber pulled up in front of a building that looked more like a luxury hotel than a private venue. Ethan checked the address twice, then stepped out into the kind of evening that practically begged for Instagram stories. A red carpet, not a metaphorical one. An actual red carpet ran up the front steps. There was valet service, mood lighting, and a floral archway framing the entrance like a wedding. At the top of the stairs, a hostess in a sequin jumpsuit checked names off a list. Inside, the place was worse. Rooftop views of the skyline, DJs spinning lo-fi remixes, sushi stations, custom cocktails with names like the Blake Teeny. Ethan moved through it like a ghost in his charcoal suit, well cut, but nothing flashy. No lapel pin, no watch with exposed gears, no shoes that shined like patent leather. His outfit said functional adult. Theirs screamed curated aesthetic. Karen spotted him before he had a chance to breathe. "Ethan!" she sang out air, kissing him with the enthusiasm of a woman tolerating a waiter who brought the wrong wine. Her eyes scanned his outfit like a TSA agent. "You clean up well," she said, which wasn't a compliment. It was a surprise. "Did you Uber all the way from where do you live again?" "Still in the city," he replied. "Works close." "Oh, right." She smiled thinly. "Still at that little company? What do you do? Again, graphics? Content?" She made it sound like finger painting. He smiled politely, gave a vague branding strategy, and changed the subject. No point throwing pearls at a woman who thought TikTok was a disease. Across the room, Blake was already holding court champagne flute in hand, laughing like he'd just remembered he was rich. Ethan scanned for his sister and found her near the bar, giving him a supportive thumbs up. He raised his brows in reply. This was the Peacock Palace, all right. Everyone here was preening, posturing, proving Ethan didn't belong, and that was exactly why he'd come. He moved toward the far edge of the rooftop, where the noise faded just enough to breathe. 1 hour and 15 minutes to go. He had no idea the night was about to crack wide open. Ethan stuck close to the edge of the rooftop, alternating between sipping his drink and counting exits. The glass was sweating in his hand bourbon. Neat, because he needed something that didn't come with a paper umbrella. His sister had already been pulled into a conversation about someone's new Tesla, and he was alone in a sea of polished veneers and cologne you could smell before the wearers arrived. Blake spotted him and made a beeline over, wrist already extended like a trophy. "New Audemars," he said, tapping the face of a watch that probably cost more than Ethan's car. "Limited edition. Waitlisted a year. What are you rocking these days?" Ethan held up his bare wrist. "Google Calendar," he deadpanned. Blake laughed like he'd just heard a dad joke. "Classic you, man. Always the minimalist." Karen floated by in a designer dress, the color of resentment. Glass of champagne in hand, dragging compliments behind her, like perfume. "Oh, Angela, that dress is to die for. And Carson, I heard about your promotion partner already? So impressive." Her eyes landed on Ethan and sharpened. "And there he is. Our family's own tech rebel. Still working at that little app company?" Her voice dipped just enough to make it sound quaint, like he was tinkering with finger puppets. "Startup," Ethan corrected. Polite, but flat. "We're in digital brand scaling." Karen's smile widened. "Well, not everyone's meant for real careers, right?" There was laughter. Not loud, but enough. Ethan didn't flinch. He just sipped his bourbon and nodded like he hadn't heard the insult sharpened into a joke. Blake clapped him on the shoulder, the universal gesture of condescension. "At least you're doing something, right?" Ethan smiled thinly. The timer in his head ticked down. He was almost halfway through. Dinner came in, course-catered, plated, and filtered for Instagram. Ethan sat near his sister, mostly silent, letting the noise pass over him like weather. People talked stocks and salaries, market dips and destination weddings. No one asked him anything. He preferred it that way. Then came the toast. Aunt Karen stood, glass raised, eyes bright. "30 is a milestone," she began, pausing just long enough for the crowd to hush. "And Blake has hit it with style, grace. And let's be honest, an apartment most of us would kill for." The crowd chuckled. Ethan sipped his drink. "We're just so proud of him," she continued, voice thick with self-satisfaction. "He's really showing what success looks like. Not like some of our wandering souls." Her eyes didn't move, but everyone else's did. Right to Ethan. A few smiles froze. One person coughed. The laughter this time was thinner, strained. His sister stiffened beside him. Ethan set his glass down carefully. He didn't react. That was his power. He'd learned that silence could be a weapon if you held it just long enough. Karen went on, oblivious or pretending. "He's driven, focused, building a future. Not everyone has that kind of clarity." Another glance. Another slice. The moment stretched. Ethan locked eyes with her across the table. No smile. No rebuttal. Just stillness. Karen blinked first. In the silence that followed, no one noticed the elevator ding. No one turned to see who had just arrived. But they would soon. Ethan had never been good at swallowing humiliation, but he'd learned how to let it dissolve slowly, bitterly. Under the surface, Aunt Karen sat down like she hadn't just broadcast a hit piece in toast form. Blake raised his glass with a modest smile like he wasn't soaking in the applause. Conversation resumed, hesitant at first, then building, like everyone had agreed to move on. But Ethan hadn't. He didn't speak. Didn't look around. He just reached for his water, not his bourbon, and stared through the condensation like it could freeze out the heat in his chest. His sister leaned in, voice low and urgent. "Let's get out of here." Her hand found his arm. "We can make up an excuse, early meeting. Car trouble? Stomach flu? I'll throw myself down the stairs if I have to." He shook his head once, slow. "No. I'm staying." She said, tight with frustration. "This isn't worth it." "Maybe," he murmured, still not looking at her. "But I am." He wasn't sure where the words came from. Maybe they'd been waiting in his throat for years, crushed under every joke, every backhanded compliment, every time someone said, "When are you going to get serious?" like his whole life was just one long detour. He stood quietly, adjusted his jacket, and walked to the bar not to drink, but to move, to breathe. He nodded to the bartender and took a seat near the far end, away from the spotlight. The bourbon still sat in his system like a slow-burning fuse. He wasn't going to explode. That's what they expected. He was going to endure. And then someone new stepped off the elevator, and everything changed. She walked in like she didn't care who was watching, but everyone watched anyway. Alexis Rivera didn't make entrances. She arrived. Slate gray blazer, black silk blouse, low heels that still sounded like authority when she crossed marble. Her dark hair was swept back in a loose, purposeful knot, and her expression carried the kind of calm that made insecure people sweat. Ethan almost choked on his drink. What the hell was Alexis doing here? She moved through the room with surgical ease, nodding when people smiled, pausing briefly to greet Blake's godfather, a silver-haired venture capitalist Ethan vaguely recognized from LinkedIn headlines. Alexis leaned in, said something that made him laugh, then scanned the room. Their eyes met. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Then she smiled. Not corporate. Not polite. Real. She walked straight toward him. Aunt Karen, 3 feet away, stopped mid-sentence. "Excuse me," she said automatically, rising. "I don't believe we've met." Alexis extended her hand. "Alexis Rivera. I run the little app company Ethan works for." Karen blinked. Ethan stood, every nerve in his spine standing with him. "I didn't realize you knew Blake's godfather," he said, voice measured. "Old investor," Alexis replied smoothly. "He told me to come meet the family." Her gaze flicked to Karen for half a second, then back to Ethan. "Didn't expect to find my lead brand strategist surrounded by champagne flutes and amateur roast comedy." Karen tried to recover. "Oh, you're his boss. We were just talking about your company. It's such a unique concept." Alexis smiled. "It's disruptive. But you know what really makes it work?" "What's that?" Karen asked, smiling tightly. "Ethan." Karen pivoted like a pageant queen, smile wide, voice suddenly syrupy. "So, Alexis, tell me, what is it like running one of those trendy tech companies? I imagine the culture is lively. All that foosball and beanbag energy, right?" She chuckled, sipping her champagne. "My son works real hours. Finance. 12-hour days. No naps in meditation pods." Alexis didn't blink. "We don't have foosball. We have deadlines." Her voice was smooth, a blade disguised as silk. Karen laughed too loud, trying to fill the sudden tension. "Of course. I just mean, you know, it's a different world. Tech people are so casual." Ethan stood frozen 5 feet away, wishing he could melt into the nearest potted plant. This was the worst-case scenario. Not only was his boss here his very famous boss, but his aunt was holding court like she was grilling a contestant on a game show called Who Wants to Belittle a Visionary. Alexis's eyes slid past Karen and landed on him. Her mouth curled just slightly. "Well, speak of the devil," she said, turning away from Karen mid-sentence. "Didn't expect to find my best brand strategist hiding next to the potato salad." Ethan nearly dropped his glass. Conversations nearby paused like someone had muted the room. "Hey," he managed, clearing his throat. I didn't know you were coming." "Neither did you, apparently," Alexis said, motioning toward his slightly loosened tie. "You look surprised." "I am." She nodded. "Good. Means I'm still mysterious." Karen glanced between them, frowning. "Wait, you two know each other?" Alexis turned slowly. "Karen, was it?" "Yes. I know Ethan very well." Karen blinked. "So, you work together?" Alexis offered the kind of smile CEOs reserve for press conferences and high-stakes boardrooms. "Ethan helped lead our last rebrand. He created the campaign that doubled our engagement metrics in under 8 weeks, and helped us close a 90 million Series C round last quarter. She sipped her drink like it was water. Frankly, it wouldn't have happened without him. The silence that followed was cavernous. Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Blake looked up from his phone like he'd missed a punchline. And, Alexis continued, voice calm, but carrying across the room like a bell, he's being profiled in Forbes next month. They're calling him a rising creative in brand leadership. I believe the phrase was visionary with grit. Pretty accurate. Ethan didn't speak. He didn't have to. The words hung in the air like smoke. Karen forced a laugh, brittle. Well, that's something. You never mentioned any of this, Ethan. He shrugged lightly. Didn't think you'd be interested. The barb was mild, but it landed. Karen smiled tightly, as if trying to suck the oxygen back into the room. Well, she said, straightening her shoulders. I always knew Ethan would figure something out. Just needed the right environment. Alexis raised her glass. He created the environment. Karen's face froze. Someone near the buffet clapped. Just once. Then again. And suddenly a few more hands joined. It wasn't a standing ovation, but it was enough. For once, Aunt Karen had nothing to say. Karen's face locked into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her cheeks twitched like she was trying to hold back a sneeze made of pure panic. Around her, people suddenly found their drinks fascinating. The only sounds were the clink of ice in glasses and the faint pulse of background music no one was dancing to. Then Blake, who had been silent too long to be comfortable, chuckled nervously. Well, hey, tech's hot right now, right? He looked around for support, nodding like he was part of the joke. Good time to be in that space. Ride the wave, you know. Alexis turned to him, one brow slightly raised. Tech's not hot, she said evenly. Talent is. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut clean through the noise. And Ethan's got more of it than most people I've met in my entire career. The table shifted. You could feel it like gravity bending toward a new center. One of Blake's friends actually set down his phone. Karen blinked twice. The kind of blink that signals a system reboot. Blake's jaw flexed like he was recalculating where he stood in the conversation. Alexis didn't smirk, didn't gloat. She just looked back at Ethan, like none of this was news to her. And to her, it wasn't. He realized that, in that moment. She hadn't said any of that to win points. She said it because it was true. For the first time all night, Ethan didn't feel like the underdog at his own family gathering. He felt like the one they had failed to understand. Not the one who had failed to measure up. He glanced around at the sea of familiar faces that had spent years smiling at him while quietly erasing his presence. And for the first time, he didn't want to disappear. He wanted to speak. Ethan cleared his throat, slow and quiet. The room stilled again. Even the music felt like it turned itself down. I appreciate that, Alexis, he said, voice steady. Really. He didn't look at Karen. He didn't have to. And just to clarify, yeah, I work at a startup. It's scrappy, chaotic, intense. We make things people don't understand at first. Until they do. There were a few nods. Ethan kept going. I've spent years being the one people underestimated. The guy with the hoodie and the rented apartment. The one who didn't fit the mold. He scanned the room not with anger, but with clarity. I don't need anyone here to validate my path. But for once, I'd appreciate not being insulted for doing something different. His sister beamed at him. A few family members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I didn't come here to brag, Ethan added, softer now. I came because Grandma asked, and because I was tired of pretending that being silent made things easier. He paused. Let the silence speak with him. I'm doing good work. I like the person I'm becoming. And if that doesn't look like success to you, maybe you need to rethink what success looks like. There was no applause, no dramatic gasp, just a slow, unmistakable change in the air like the entire room had finally turned to face the truth. Ethan picked up his drink, calm now. The fire that had been burning all night had settled into something steadier. A pilot light. Permanent. Nobody called him a failure after that. They didn't line up, but they came one by one. A cousin who hadn't spoken to Ethan since high school walked over, hands in his pockets, and muttered something about, "Always knew you were sharp." An uncle who'd once offered to help Ethan get into something stable clapped him on the back and said, "Tech, huh? Maybe I should have gone that route." Someone else asked if his company was hiring. Of course they did. Karen stayed seated. She sipped her drink like it had betrayed her. When Ethan passed her table to retrieve his coat, she looked everywhere but at him. He paused, gave her a chance. Nothing. Just the faintest twitch in her jaw. Not guilt. Just discomfort. That was fine. He hadn't come for her validation, and now he didn't need it. Blake made a beeline next, all forced ease and manic grins. "Hey man," he said, holding out a fist. "Crazy night, huh?" Ethan hesitated, then bumped it. The contact felt like an apology in search of dignity. "Guess I owe you a drink sometime," Blake added. "Catch up. Tech to finance, right?" Ethan just nodded. "Sure." He turned and found his sister at the edge of the crowd. Smiling so hard, she looked like she might burst. She mouthed, "Told you." He shrugged. She rolled her eyes, then mouthed again, "Proud of you." He didn't respond, just tapped his chest once and smiled. She knew what it meant. People were still talking as he slipped away about the company. The funding. The CEO who'd appeared like some sort of retribution angel. He didn't care. He hadn't burned the room down. He just stood in the middle of it and refused to shrink. And for once, they'd seen him for who he really was. The night was cooler than it had started. The city's hum steady below them as they stepped into the elevator. Alexis hit the ground floor button and leaned casually against the mirrored wall. "That was a show," she said. Ethan loosened his tie fully now. Breath finally leaving his lungs in one long exhale. "Yeah. Thanks for the unplanned rescue." Alexis smirked. "Please. You didn't need rescuing. You needed a mic." He laughed. "Still weird though. Being the one people listen to. The one they finally take seriously." She glanced sideways. "It's nice seeing people get what they deserve, huh?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "Still weird when it's me." The elevator doors opened. The doorman nodded respectfully as they passed. Outside, the air felt clean. Ethan looked up at the skyline, then down at his phone. No missed calls, no new texts, just stillness. Alexis hailed a car. "You coming?" Ethan looked back once at the building. The laughter, the lights, the people still clinging to their old scorecards. Then he looked ahead. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go." Ethan got home just after midnight. He tossed his blazer over the back of the chair, kicked off his shoes, and stood for a moment in the quiet of his apartment. The hum of the refrigerator. The soft creak of old floorboards. Nothing grand. Nothing expensive. But it was his. All of it. Hard-earned and fully lived in. He poured a glass of water, sat down at his desk, and opened his laptop. Notifications flickered in the corner of the screen. Mentions, tags, messages from coworkers who'd caught wind of Alexis's impromptu drop-in. His sister had already texted 3 gifs and a quote from The Godfather. That moment when the quiet one takes out the room. He smiled. Then, almost without thinking, he opened LinkedIn. The cursor blinked in the empty post window. He typed slow, measured words. Nothing flashy. Just truth. The best revenge isn't a comeback, it's never having left in the first place. He hit post. Closed the lid. Went to bed. By morning, his phone was buzzing non-stop. DMs from people he hadn't spoken to in years. Recruiters. Journalists. A startup founder he once pitched to and got ghosted by. Everyone suddenly had questions, offers, admiration. And then, buried in the middle of it all, was an email. From Karen Whitmore. Subject: no subject. Body. Proud of you. No emojis, no qualifiers, no backhanded tone, just 4 words. Too late to fix anything, but maybe just in time to acknowledge it. He didn't reply. Instead, he stood at the window, coffee in hand, looking out at a city that had never made anything easy but had never asked him to pretend, either. This wasn't a victory lap. There was no parade waiting. Just the quiet satisfaction of having shown up, stood his ground, and let the truth speak louder than the insults ever did. He didn't need applause. He didn't need revenge. He had something better. He had respect. And this time, it wasn't borrowed. It was built. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.